What is the one control that you think has the greatest impact in your organization? Which is the one control that you can't live without?
We do two things, really. The biggest control is really our self-assessment process. We have a continuous 360 assessment process in all of our software. The biggest change, or the biggest value in that control that we saw was opening that up to beyond our security team. So we have DBAs running pen tests against us. We have our own network engineers. Opening up the realm of security to be the responsibility of really everybody, cross-discipline, was the largest value, I think, for us. It really opened our eyes to what we're seeing.
I have a couple answers, so I'm sorry.
I can pin you in the box on one.
I know I can't answer one. I think a lot of times we forget that the basics are so important. And I think back, and I give this example a lot. In IBM, I've been a manager for over 20 years. I don't know anybody's birth date that actually works for me, at least the year that they were born, because it could be age discrimination. I think it comes from very, beginning things of who is allowed to see what data. None of our managers have data that's sensitive personal information on their employees because they don't need to have it to manage them. So I think that that's very important, and with that, what's the access control, and how do you have policies around it? And I feel very lucky that we have a very global, centralized policy within IBM, and there's not a whole bunch of business units deciding what to do. So I would say that's a very traditional thought. To make sure I'm not so boring, I'd say, our malware defenses are key, because as Chris said, half of the people, there's a whole lot more people infected out there than you think. They are, and I think that we've worked on trying to find that probably better than a lot of others. And I still don't, I'm not under the misconception that nobody is infected, but I think that we're trying to find them and remediate them pretty well.
So I would say, I was talking to Malcolm after his keynote, and I said, on your list of the immutable laws, I said there's the last one, which is, or perhaps it's the first one, is, systems are run by people. And people are often the biggest problem, because people are just people. People do dumb things, they do deliberate things, they do stupid things. And in order to really sort of improve our security, you have to automate human error out of the system. And so I would say that one of the more important controls is change management, patch management, system automation will actually take out a lot of the cause of the errors that the security issues in our organizations.
Quick.
In the advancing world of technology, I think that one of the most important security controls is the new invention called the spreadsheet. As I deal with organizations, the ones who are doing the best jobs are the ones who understand what the heck things are doing. They understand what systems are where, they understand what data is where, they understand who can touch what, when was the last time things were updated, which systems have been tested effectively, and they're tracking it. Right? Because the biggest enemy, perhaps after complexity to security, is just pure ignorance of what you should be worried about. Whether you're building a new system, tying to a new business partner, deciding how to re-implement something or do a maintenance release. And so maintaining a grasp of the systems and the folks and the policies and finding a way to map them all together. And I think it was the great mention of the fact that we have to do this sustainably, right? I think that really is so fundamental. Folks who have their arms around it tend not to make as many mistakes.
Fantastic. Well, I got a list more, but I think it's time to open it up to our questions from the audience. And Laura, we'll have you come back up to kick off that segment.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to start off with one question. We related back to Malcolm's keynote a little bit during your discussion just now. And one of the things I took away from his session this morning was that the misperception of risk can be a very big problem for all of us, not least because we're all not always objective about the things that we're passionate about. So my first question is for Jason. Looking at your company as a whole, what risks do you think your folks tend to misperceive, and what kind of dangers does that pose for the company?
Well, I think there's, at an individual level, experts tend to think that they know the solution for a specific security threat. So the network guys will say, well, we can put a firewall at it. The application guys will say, well, we use anti-SAMI, so we can throw those controls at it. And really what we're finding is that the threats are so complex that no one single discipline or one single control is really enough. So it's a very layered, very 360 OpenIA architecture we have to follow.
So Linda, I'd ask you the same question for the IBM company.
Sorry, I was listening to you and I forgot the question.
On the misperception of risk.
Oh, misperception of risk. I think that I think that people don't even realize that they have it. I just actually read a research paper and it talked about viruses and that all these companies thought that everybody else had the virus and it's not them. So I think that a lot of people just don't even realize the threats that are even out there, and that's part of what's on me, is to educate them. It goes back to Malcolm, it's for probably the psychological and economical. How do you explain to the business what their threats are?
Fair enough. So now we'll take some questions from the audience. Janan and Andy, I see you guys back there.
Hi, I'm Janan Budge, Senior Analyst and Advisor serving the security and risk community. The question from the audience is, the idea of building security in or security by design is a long-standing theme. What success have you experienced in making this more than just a bumper sticker?
Sure. I think what's changed a little bit is that security by design, or building security, it used to be a technologist thing to do. The same way you'd write high quality code. If you could teach those darn developers just to write better code, this whole problem would go away. Secure by design ends up being more than that, right? We've learned over the last 15 years that you've got to talk and understand what the customers are trying to do. Figure that security is situational, it's contextual. It's not about the developer. Go tell the developer what to program, but understand what the applications are supposed to do. Understand the business function. Understand the kinds of data and services it is going to interact with, and design that in, right? Design secure treatment in. If you go to Privacy Clearinghouse and take a look at the big breaches, some of the largest breaches have been systems which accidentally did things like printed social security numbers on the outsides of envelopes. So secure by design means a lot of different things, and it's more nowadays. It is more in the modern frame than just telling developers not to make mistakes.
Let me just answer that practically too. What I think is very promising is, if you look at IBM, the way we do business, IBM, a lot of its business is vertical, meaning we have vertically aligned organizations like public sector. And what we're finding, and this was driven by the vertically aligned organizations, they are mandating that a security architect be a part of the proposal process. They don't do that to sell security. They're doing it because we've defined a set of table stakes that must be implemented in and around every sort of system that we build for our clients. And those architects are responsible for assuring that the key controls are implemented and that the customer recognizes the liability that they may incur for failure to implement a sort of an industry average set of controls, and then consult with them on what would be industry optimized. This is happening more and more frequently, and I find that that's indicative of the fact that Secure by Design isn't just a bumper sticker. Secure by Design is something that, we as a company, it's part of our culture, but it's also something that customers want themselves. So.
And I think it's showing up. I'll be spending Thanksgiving week in Germany, a large auto manufacturer who's invited all of their vendors in to explain what our secure engineering initiatives are for the corporation. And it's part of them being that active citizen in the community. They're asking this now: am I getting secure products and services from the core vendors that are providing my technology for me? So we're starting to see this show up more and more again on bids, us being proactive in doing that, doing a much more systematic approach throughout the company.
I think we've got time for one more question.
Hi everybody, I'm Andrew Jakewith. I'm a Senior Analyst with Forrester, and I serve security and risk professionals. We have a question from the audience asking if somebody from IBM can speak to how you're working with other industry stakeholders to develop frameworks for security best practices in the cloud in particular. And the gist of the question is this going to be a vendor-by-vendor thing, or is there a set of standards that everybody can agree on that is going to move the industry forward?
Yeah, and I'm sure Linda and Jack can have some points on this as well. We've started working with the Cloud Security Alliance. Now, to be honest, when we looked at the market a couple years ago and we published our own security guidelines, we did so because we didn't think that the standards that had been sort of defined for the marketplace were either detailed or rigorous enough. And so we defined our own standards. Those standards we've now taken to the CSA, and we're working with CSA and part of that particular ecosystem. We're also working quite a bit with Jericho, Open Group, et cetera, to sort of define standards around virtualization and sort of pervasive computing, et cetera, et cetera. Cloud is kind of a difficult situation right now. I think we all recognize that there is no one standard out there. Our hope and our expectation is that CSA will become the de facto standard. But I think the jury's out as to who's actually going to win in the space.
All right, well, thank you very much to Steve and Jason and Linda and Chris and Jack for being here. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Pat.
Thank you.
Thank you.